Hi, it's Irene Weinberg, and welcome to the Grief and Rebirth podcast. Before we get started with the episode, make sure to like and subscribe wherever you're listening or watching so you never miss an episode. Every week, we share heartfelt stories, spiritual insights, and practical guidance to help you navigate grief and trauma, find hope, and discover rebirth after loss. By subscribing, you'll get access to every episode and join our supportive community on this journey. Thanks for being here, and let's dive in. Hi, everyone. I hope this message finds each of you so very well. I'm speaking to you today from my studio in West Orange, New Jersey, and I could not be more delighted to welcome Laing Rikkers, an award-winning author, entrepreneur, and executive coach whose acclaimed book, Morning Leaves, Cultivating a Life of Beauty, Meaning, and Joy, is now in its second edition with Red Hen Press, and grew out of her own journey through profound grief after the unexpected loss of her younger sister in 2019. What began as a personal practice of reflection and connection with nature has evolved into a compassionate, practical guide for anyone navigating loss, burnout, or major life transitions. Through her grief workshops, Laing creates nurturing spaces where art, poetry, journaling, and community help participants transform loss into resilience and renewed joy. Her approach is gentle but powerful, reminding us that grief can be a doorway to deeper connection, clarity, and meaning. Before stepping into this calling, Laing spent 2 decades in leadership and private equity. Her career has always centered on helping people and organizations grow with intention. With degrees from Harvard and Columbia, and training in both executive coaching and grief support, Laing now speaks, writes, and teaches nationwide. Her mission is simple and profound: to help people find strength in vulnerability, creativity in transition, and hope in the moments that challenge us most. I'm looking forward to talking with Laing, who's joining us from Carlsbad, California, about the devastating and unexpected loss of her younger sister, Jenna, and the profound ways that grief reshaped her life. We'll talk about how working with a grief counselor helped her navigate her darkest moments, and how simple outdoor rituals and long walks became anchors for healing and perspective. We'll also explore how loss can reveal strengths we didn't know we had, the grounding daily practices that support resilience, and heartfelt insights Laing has gathered along the way. Wisdom that can bring light to even our heaviest seasons. Hi there, and welcome to the international award-winning Grief and Rebirth podcast. I'm your host, author, and trauma survivor, Irene Weinberg, here to support you wherever you are on your healing journey. Each week, I connect with leading grief and trauma experts, intuitive healers, mediums, and inspiring voices who share powerful stories of loss, resilience, and transformation. If you're searching for hope, meaning, and a path forward after loss or trauma, you're in the right place. Together, let's rediscover joy, healing, and the possibility of rebirth. Hey, Laing, a warm welcome to Grief and Rebirth podcast.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Our pleasure, truly. And this is going to be a wonderful interview. And everyone doesn't know this yet, but I'm announcing that you're a wonderful poet. And I loved your book. Oh, it's
you.
beautiful.
So nice.
So let's start from the start. You experienced the devastating and unexpected loss of your sister, Jenna, in late 2019, just before the world shut down. How did that moment and the circumstances around her passing reshape your understanding of your work, your purpose, and yourself?
Well, it was a huge shock that she died when she did. She was 46 and she was at home with she had a 9-year-old daughter at the time and her husband. And it was really unexpected. And it's hard to describe how that kind of shock really just I remember calling my mom and just saying, I think that there's a hole in the universe. It just was devastating. And she had had some symptoms of sleep apnea up to that point, which were snoring, daytime sleepiness, that sort of thing. But nobody knew that she was really ill in a serious way that anyone was concerned that she might die. And so it really blindsided us.
How devastating. How many years were there between the two of you?
3.
Right. So,
Yeah.
I mean, you literally knew her all her life. You were the older sister. So, what
Yeah.
a shock.
Yeah.
And
My only sibling. So
oh,
just a big
oh,
loss.
terrible.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm so sorry. So, you spend this is an irony we're going to tell everyone now about because you spent your career helping people with obstructive sleep apnea. What a coincidence.
Mhm.
Only to lose her to obstructive sleep apnea. So
Yeah.
how did you you must have been so like upset because you could have helped her in some way. And she, I don't know if she ignored you or whatever, but how did you navigate that emotional complexity of the realization while also trying, and you also had to stay steady for your family, right? And for your
Yeah.
company. And this was during the early part of the pandemic. So how did you get through all that?
It was a lot. It really was a lot. I think the first, month or two, fortunately, the pandemic hadn't started. We were lucky we were able to gather and have a big service for her. And that was really important to be able to be together. Um, but otherwise, I was just in a fog for a bit. And was just really at that point, sort of one foot in front of the other. But I think, oh, immediately the night that she died, I remember thinking, this is going to be an opportunity to help other people and educate them and bring awareness to, you know, the risks, particularly for women, of obstructive sleep apnea or OSA. And so I've done everything in my power to try to educate people and, let people know. It's such an incredibly common condition. But they estimate about 1 in 5 people have obstructive sleep apnea, which is, for people who aren't aware, obstructive sleep apnea. And when you're sleeping and lay down, the soft tissue falls back and blocks the airway, and that leads to largely cardiovascular damage, but it's also highly correlated with stroke and cancer and other
Uh,
types of issues. And so
how did you reckon with it? With here you are in your life helping all these people, and your sister is ignoring you, right? You must have reached out to her a few times and said, "Hey, sis,
I sure did. I reached out to her a number of times. I sent her the name of a specialist who I was like, this guy's 5 miles from your house. We'll give you a device. She was a big supporter of the company that I had co-founded. She was an investor. I think, at some level, being the younger sister, I'd probably,
she had sister deafness."
yes, I'd probably given her maybe a few too many bits of advice over the years. And
Right.
so, you know, and I think also she did say that she had spoken with her primary care doctor, and obstructive sleep apnea is classically associated with older, heavier men, and women. While there are fewer cases than men, they are much more disproportionately underdiagnosed because of that association. And so they never gave her a diagnostic test, which she had all of the classic symptoms. And, it's just heartbreaking when they did her autopsy, found that she had an enlarged heart. And, that's part of the stress of not getting enough oxygen. Your heart has
Wow.
to work that hard. And so, there may have been other underlying conditions that nobody was aware of, but it was just tragic. It was, and so unnecessary. It just was hard
Oh,
to.
I'm curious, how did you, Lang, hone in on obstructive sleep apnea as working with that to start a company?
Mm,
What inspired
I
that?
well, I had been for 20 years an investor in medical device companies, and one of the companies that I was at for a number of years was a dental laboratory business, and And so they made devices in the mouth, and there were a lot of other devices on the market, but we didn't think that they were well designed and they were not up to the standard of medical devices that you would find in the more traditional medical paths. The dental community's sort of standards were a little bit different, and so we thought that there was an opportunity to bring medical standards into the oral realm. And so it's been very successful. The company has
No,
treated
wonderful.
thousands and thousands of people, and yeah, no, it's really a wonderful thing for people, because the typical treatment for sleep apnea, most people use what they call a CPAP machine, which blows air down. And the problem with that is about 50% of people who are prescribed one can't tolerate it. There are social issues, there's discomfort
Yeah,
issues.
well, it's not exactly the sexiest thing in the world when you look at
No,
that
it's
apparatus
not.
in the middle
No,
of
it
the
is not.
night.
And so people are comfortable putting something in their mouth. I think Invisalign and retainers, and people have gotten used to the idea of sleeping with something in their mouth, and it's comfortable, and you can take it out and put it in your pocket. So it's easy to clean, easy to travel with. It's been a great thing for a lot of people.
That's wonderful. Well, now, you know what? We should make sure that the show notes have the link to your company because there are people listening to this who may be interested in learning more about that because you're waking some people up to
That sounds great.
sleep
I would love to
apnea,
provide
right?
that information.
Right. And so I know that you found an exceptional grief counselor, which is right up my alley. And that was a turning point for you. So now you're going for healing, which is motivated by the loss of Jenna.
Yeah.
And what did those conversations open up for you that you couldn't access on your own? I mean, you're obviously a very resourceful woman on your own, but what did they open up for you? And how did that therapist guide you through those dark days? I mean, what was that
Yeah.
like for you?
I was really very fortunate. The woman who I met with, she was just able to help me sort of forge a path. I was in such a dark hole. I didn't know what it would look like on the other side of being in that darkness. I just didn't, I needed somebody to hold my hand and walk me through it. And because I didn't know where I was going, I didn't know if there was light to be found.
And the fact that you had children and all of that, and that you were affecting them, I think it must have been very helpful also to have someone to
Yes,
talk to about it.
absolutely. Yeah, and somebody who I think being able to talk to anybody is helpful, but to be able to talk to somebody who where it's also a confidential conversation and you could really let loose, I could cry, I could be angry, I could, because grief brings up a lot of emotions beside just sadness, and brings up old resentments and anger and
Absolutely.
loneliness and so many other things. And it was also helpful to have somebody there to go, this is normal. Like, you're not going crazy. You're not off on some path that, is truly unexpected. Obviously, everybody's grief is unique to them, but there are things that are common for people to experience. And it was just helpful to have somebody say, this is okay. What you're
Right.
going through is part of
Oh,
the process. And so, because when you're in it, I used to describe it like being in the washing machine. You didn't know which way was up. You didn't know how to get out. You didn't, and to have somebody who could just say, "I'm with you. I'm here."
and when you're falling apart, that person says this is very normal and it's not a permanent condition, you will feel differently a little bit. And then also, grief, working with her and all, unlocked hidden strengths or parts of yourself you may have been ignoring that you didn't even know about. Did that happen for you?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I particularly, once lockdown happened, there was, the shock, the grief, the fear. We were all so terrified in those early days of the pandemic of what was going to happen. And I really needed to metabolize some of that energy and do something creative so that it didn't eat me alive. And one of the things that I started doing was a daily writing practice. I read Julia Cameron's The Artist's Way, which many people I think are familiar with. It's a
Mhm.
classic, wonderful book. And I had never been someone who journaled or wrote on a daily basis. And I found it to be very, very helpful. And I started channeling things that I was sort of hearing, and they now are what we call poems. I didn't think of myself as a poet, and I
Beautiful.
didn't
They're
think of
beautiful.
myself as a writer really. And but I was integrating what I was seeing outside with what I was trying to untangle about myself, and I found the act of writing creatively to be just a tremendous tool to help me, pull some of those things apart and get them outside of myself so that I could look at them and evaluate them and understand in a different way.
Yeah, it's so helpful. And it also helps you to begin to cultivate beauty and meaning and purpose when things are
100%.
feeling very overwhelming, because now you're getting practice and you're learning better how to do that, right?
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And yeah, and to have some structure. I was getting up and doing this every morning, and it gave me a part of a routine that was very useful for me to, sometimes just the getting out of bed can be hard. And
Yep.
so I
Yep.
had
Yep.
something I needed to do and something that I needed to share, and a special space to listen and be able to um, get out some of those things that were maybe otherwise trapped inside.
Yeah. You must have felt relieved in the mornings after you wrote what you had to say,
Yeah,
right?
it was beautiful. Yeah, it was a
Yeah,
really nice
it must
practice.
have been. I mean, I just imagine. And now I want to talk to you about your 7 simple grounding practices for self care, because you also
Mhm.
learned about that during this whole grieving process. And I'm going to say what they are, and I'm going to let you explain to everybody what they are. But they're sleep, eat, steep, walk it, talk it, write it, and pay it forward. So you say that these practices gave voice to the soul when words alone weren't enough, and you're such a wordsmith. So that's very interesting and helped you with calm, grounding, and resilience. You want to talk to us about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So those are the things that I keep as sort of my own personal checklist. And when things feel off kilter, or even now, I go back to that list and think through what's off. And usually if I go through them, I find that something isn't quite right or I haven't been as diligent. So sleep, I think that's fairly straightforward, but just to always remember I need to get great sleep, and I need to take it seriously. I need to have good sleep hygiene, and all of the things that we hear about the importance of that. But if I'm not getting enough sleep, to realize that that is going to impact my ability to cope. And so that's always first on the list. Eat is both not only putting healthy things into my body, but also resisting putting unhealthy things. And by that, I'm particularly thinking about drugs and alcohol. I think it can get tempting to try to numb oneself. And, that's when you're grieving or dealing with something really challenging, it's a temptation. And yet I always think that, the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line. And if you start adding other substances, it makes the line longer, and it's just harder to get through things and harder to face them. And so to be really diligent about that. But of course, also putting healthy, nutritious foods into our bodies so that we're strong and feel good,
You
and
eat none of that fried food and processed food and all that other good
none of
stuff?
that,
None of
none
that.
of that stuff. I mean, or just minimally, right? It's just to at least stay aware of it. Or if, when I start to feel, not so great, so look at like, oh, well, yeah, I've been eating desserts. Like, what am I doing? Like, I
How
don't
much
feel good
sugar
when
am I
I do
putting in
that.
my body, right?
Exactly, exactly. So that's sleep and eat. And then steep is more of a spiritual practice, and that might be meditation, it might be prayer, it might be organized religion, depending on, one's sort of cultural orientation. But I think to always remember to pause and to stay aware of that which is much greater than our individual selves and our individual worries.
Absolutely.
It puts it
Sort
in
of seeing things from a
context.
higher view.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And to be able to ask for help and for peace. And so those are the first three. And then walk it, a big believer in, processing emotional stress, be it grief or anger or whatever it might be, physically. By, I think, getting outside and walking is the best. I also like to go, I go to bar classes. I like to, be in a group. I like to move. I like to, be inspired to move.
Right.
And I think that particularly when we're outdoors and we can connect with nature, it's a very powerful healing tool. I always say to myself and try to keep in the back of my head, it's never a bad idea to go for a walk. And I never come back thinking, what was I doing? That was a waste of time. And never, never. It's always a good thing. So walk it, talk it. It gets back to a little bit of what we were saying earlier, the importance of communicating and having someone listen and feeling understood. I think with grief, that sense of not being alone and feeling heard is really important so that you don't go spiraling
Right.
down.
And I love the idea that you were talking to a therapist because your Aunt Minnie may not have the right guidance for you as
Right.
you're crying your eyes out
Right.
that a trained therapist does.
Right. Well, and the trained therapist also is neutral. And, a lot of times when you're dealing with a big loss, there are a lot of complicated relationships. And so if you're talking to somebody else in your family or a friend, they have their own relationship and feelings. And so there is something really particularly fabulous about being able to talk to somebody
Yeah.
who
It's,
is outside of the situation and can see it more
yeah.
cleanly.
Yeah. I think
So
that's so wise.
yeah. So talk it, walk it, write it. In my case, it was actually writing, but I think doing anything creative allows one to take, the emotional challenges and pull it apart, roll it around, and then put it back out into the world as something different and something beautiful and something positive, something expressive, and something that's yours, where you've been able to manipulate it and be able to transform it into something else and something that you can share, because that's also the connection of being able to share something that you've created. I think is very powerful.
And it also gives a lot of comfort to make this lemonade out of the lemons you got and to be able to help other people with it.
For me,
Right?
it's been an incredible
Yeah.
gift. Yeah, I
For
really
both
feel
of us,
very
I can
lucky.
totally relate to this
Yeah.
and pay it forward, which is what we're talking about.
Yeah, I think the ultimate is when you can help other people, and you feel the best when you can see other sides of yourself and what you have to give, and that you are important to other people. And that's, be it, I am on some nonprofit boards. I'm on the board of Feeding San Diego, for instance, and that's a really special way to help take care of the community. But, doing things, doing grief workshops, communicating with, people like you, sharing my book. These are all ways that are really fantastic ways for me to be able to pay it
Yeah.
forward. And I love what you're doing too. I mean, this is just an amazing platform that you've created for
Thank you
helping
so
others.
much. I mean, it's helping so many people. I'm very humbled by it. I'm just overjoyed and humbled by it. And like you, it came out of a tragedy, a profound tragedy, but like it's just the same way. This is the lemonade. This
Yeah,
is, yeah, right?
yeah,
So,
absolutely.
right. So let's talk about Morning Leaves, cultivating
Okay.
a life of beauty, meaning, and joy, which I enjoyed, I must say to everyone. And it is an award winning blend of reflection, poetry, and nature inspired art, creativity, presence, and healing. How did the act of creating, writing, drawing, and imagining Morning Leaves help you transform this grief? That's another vehicle you use to transform your grief into meaning, connection, and light, right?
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So as I mentioned, I started writing in the morning. I did not start with the intention of writing a book. That was not on my bucket list of things I was planning to do. But it was really the context of, my sister having lost, or my niece having lost her mother, really. And this question, particularly in the beginning of the pandemic, of, well, what if something happens to me? Like, what about my children? Like, have I left them with enough resources and information? And do they know me well enough? And all of these things. And so I typed up what I had been writing in the mornings and thought, well, this is at least a start for them to really know a bit more about who I am. And so I typed them up and started organizing them. And then in going back and rereading them, realizing that while for me they are very particular and about things that mean something to me, and I can share that, some of that with my kids, there's also something more universal about the way they're all botanical metaphors, and they're all
I
about.
love that.
No, thank you. They're really about looking at ourselves and understanding who we are. And I think that grief, cracks things open, and you see things differently after a big tragedy. And I think the awareness of, who you are and how you're living, and are you are you the person you want to be? Are you living the way you want to live? And you realize the brevity of life, and all of those things. And so I typed them up, organized them. I have some friends who are professional writers, and I shared it with them and said, what do you think? Like, is there something here? And got nice encouragement to keep going. And so I added an introduction and some context in the story. And it developed into a book. And it's just been the most beautiful and sort of unexpected gift for me. And my sister was a book person, and she had done the Radcliffe Publishing program, and she'd worked in publishing in New York, and she worked for a literary agent, and she, done a number of different things in the book world over time, and in addition to other things as well. But I have this sense of her sort of sitting on my shoulder, chuckling like, "Ha ha!" Here you are writing a book, because it was not really what I was.
But you had pictured.
And yet it's been the most rewarding, fulfilling, beautiful gift that I've
Well, it's
had.
giving you also the ability to reach out with the beauty of who you are and really express yourself to people. And it's a wonderful vehicle. And the other surprise you got is that you felt your sister's presence while writing.
Yeah.
So now this opened up you to spirituality.
Yeah.
So tell
Absolutely.
me all about that, because that's another passion. How have you had experiences beyond feeling her presence, and what did that feel like? That shifted your understanding of what remains after we physically
Yeah.
leave?
Yeah. Well, you know, I don't have great words for it because I don't fully understand it, but I have a sense of her being with me often. And I, that the way that you can smell something, like sometimes I can feel her spirit just being, I feel it right now. Like she's sort of here,
Definitely here.
and I know, and so I have an ongoing relationship with her. Obviously, it's different than the one we had before, but in some ways we've gotten closer and
Closer.
understand one another differently, and I think are more compassionate and empathetic for the other. And um, so so the relationship has just evolved, and it's a bit different,
It's a
but it's
beautiful
wonderful.
thing. I had the same experience with my husband. He's still around, but the relationship seems to be getting deeper, even
Mm.
somehow. It's true. And I want to ask you, if someone here, which I'm sure there are quite a few people here, are listening in the midst of their grief, what would you want them to know about the possibility of starting their healing journey through walking, talking, and writing?
Mm.
Have you got guidance
I
for them about that?
Absolutely. Well, I think that we'll start with the walking. I think that sometimes just literally getting outside. It doesn't have to be, strenuous physical activity, but even just a walk around the block. I think the light is really important. The seeing things that are alive, sort of recognizing, the cycle of nature and rebirth, and be particularly, in spring and summer, and where you hearing the birds, and there's something very powerful about that. And we're animals. We have our our animal nature, and to be able to get outside of our technology, and be able to really look and feel and sense, I think is important, really deeply important. And then we've been talking about the importance of connecting with somebody else, and ideally a professional, somebody to talk to, and somebody who can help make sense of
Hmm.
what you're going through, and make you feel less alone. I think that there is nothing more devastating than that crushing loneliness. And and we're here all together, and there is a big network of people who are available to help, and then to do something creative. I think to do something fun, to create beauty, to sense beauty, to and to even take that darkness and pull it out of yourself and look at it and, pull it apart and be able to see the facets of it and then put it back together in a way that you can share and use that as other ways to connect with people. There's an organization that comes out of research at the Harvard School of Public Health called the Foundation for Art and Healing. And they've done a tremendous amount of research on the power of creative work, on helping people get through, grief, loneliness, depression, and
Wow.
it is a very tried and true way for people to work through difficult times.
So now they get this terrible grief that they're dealing with. And through what you're telling them, they can really open up and rebirth themselves in all kinds of wonderful new ways. It can help
Absolutely.
them to do that. And I know,
Absolutely.
right? And I know that you also have grief workshops and you work with people through grief workshops. So, how do you help all these people who are grieving turn their heartbreak into resilience, clarity, and renewed joy? I mean, tell us about them. And do you have one
Well,
coming up soon that maybe people would like to participate in?
yeah, I mean, I do them, periodically, and my website has the list of events that I am doing, and I just completed one last week, and they're really just beautiful. You get a group of people, and to have them share their stories. Everybody's story is a bit different, but there are common threads between all of them, and I think for people to feel more connected to other people and that there are other people who have experiences like them is important. And that particular workshop was a writing workshop, and we were in a space where we could all go outside, and
Were you in California?
we were in California. We were in the San Diego area, and people wrote really beautiful things during the time that we had together. And some people like to share them. Other people like to share the experience of writing. And some people choose not to share at all. But just the idea of being together and thinking through some of the things that we've talked about today of like, how do I incorporate this into my life, and how do I create some routine and structure that's healthy and positive and will help me sort of down a path to get to the other side of this, and
Right.
really find the meaning and the joy that can exist on the other side of a bad loss.
Beautiful. And I would bet you that there are people who bond with each other and make new friendships from these workshops because now you kind of sometimes your friendships start to change when you've been through something like this. And now you're finding
Absolutely.
new people with more of a commonality for what you're experiencing.
Definitely. I think that that's very true, that there are some friends who just don't get it or aren't there or aren't comfortable with what the intensity of what you're experiencing, and they kind of fall away for at least a season, and other people rise up, and maybe there's somebody that maybe it's somebody new, but then you end up with connections that are deeper and
Deeper,
stronger in the moment. Yeah.
more understanding where you're at, vibrating where you're at now,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And what is the Lang tip for finding joy in life?
Well, I think that the most important thing is to be focused on the here and now, and where you want to put your energy and your time, and to appreciate being alive and being present and connected to other people, and to not do the shoulds and the coulds, all that. Just go do it. Here we
I
are
learned from
right
a
now.
therapist. She said, "Stop shooting yourself."
Yes, exactly, exactly. And I'll read you the dedication of my book because it's related to this. It says that this book is dedicated to Jenna, who abruptly left too early, cracked me open, and whispered, "Today, now."
There you go.
And that's how I try to live now, is really, this is it. I don't know that I have a tomorrow. I don't know, and it's easy. I think, we all hear those kinds of platitudes, and yet when you've experienced somebody actually disappear the way you did and the way I did, it brings it into much sharper focus that no,
Absolutely.
really now,
I'll
go
bet
do
you're
it
an even
now.
better mother. I'll bet you're an even better partner. I'll bet because now you are more conscious
Yes.
like the people in your life who you love. What happened to me is this could be like it was for me the last day. You don't know. The last time you had spoken to Jenna, you didn't know that another day would come when she was totally gone. So it's made me very conscious of how I talk to the people in my life and make sure that the ones who need to know, who I want them to know that I really love them. And
Yeah.
because you never know if that's the last thing you hear from someone,
Absolutely.
right?
Absolutely. It's very important just to stay deliberate and thoughtful and present.
Right. Lang, in closing, I'd like to share this special quote from your book, Morning Leaves, Cultivating a Life of Beauty, Meaning, and Joy, with our Grief and Rebirth podcast audience. It's a beautiful quote, and it applies to what we're talking about. At the end of my eulogy, after describing her many accomplishments, her irreverent wit, and her inclination to celebrate, I suggested that all we have is now, right now, as in today. So go carve out the life you want and celebrate the milestones and the people you love. Thank you for reminding us that grief is not an ending, it's a doorway. And on the other side, there can always be connection, meaning, and hope. From my heart, I wish you abundant blessings always.
Thank you for having me. It's been wonderful.
Thank you. Much appreciated. Thank you so much. Thanks for tuning in to Grief and Rebirth. Remember, you can dive deeper into everything we've discussed by checking out the show notes and all past episodes at griefandrebirth.com. Don't forget to follow us on social media at Irene S. Weinberg on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. If you're watching on YouTube, be sure to subscribe to our channel at Healing from Grief and never miss a video. For those of you listening, you'll find links to my 2 books, Good to the Last Drop and They Serve Bagels in Heaven, in the show notes. And if you're watching on YouTube, you can see those books listed right above, so don't miss out. And here comes a special treat. If you sign up for Audible as a first-time user using my link, which you can find in the show notes, you can get They Serve Bagels in Heaven for free. And finally, people often ask me what I read, what I use, and what I recommend for healing and self-care. So I've carefully curated a compilation of those items to share with you. You can head over to www.amazon.com/shop/Irene S. Weinberg to check them out. And to my cherished Grief and Rebirth podcast fans, stay tuned and see you again soon.